Congo's elusive peace, next on International Focus.
The Institute of World Affairs at UWM and Milwaukee Public Television present International Focus, a global magazine linking Wisconsin and the world.
Welcome to International Focus. I'm Doug Savage, Assistant Director of the Institute of World Affairs at UWM. The decade-long conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo has the dubious distinction of being the widest interstate war in modern African history. It's also the bloodiest, with an estimated 5 million dead and countless others displaced. The conflict between various Congolese factions is complicated by the involvement of competing foreign interests. Neither elections in 2006 nor a peace deal signed in January of 2008 have brought about a lasting peace. With fighting flaring once again, we're revisiting the origins of the conflict and looking ahead to possible solutions. For a practitioner's perspective on peace in the DRC, we didn't have to look far from home. From 2001 to 2004, our own IWA director, Rob Ricigliano, was part of a team that worked informally with the leadership of the three main combatant parties in support of the DRC peace process. In addition to working on the national level negotiations, the team also helped facilitate local ceasefire in North Kivu, the site of much of the current round of fighting. Rob, welcome to this side of the International Focus Desk.
Thanks, Doug.
Well, I'd like to start, if we could, backing up a bit and sort of reviewing the history of the DRC.
So if we had a month-long series of shows, we probably could scratch the surface. But if we try to run through it fairly quickly, Congo's a Belgian colony, 150 years, becomes independent in the early 60s, late 50s, early 60s. Lumumba is elected president. He has socialist leanings and is assassinated with complicity of the Belgian government and many believe the U.S. government. That leads then to a 35-plus year dictatorship by Mobutu Sese Seko. And then in the 90s, early 90s, 1994, when the genocide in Rwanda happens, 800,000 Tutsi and moderate Hutu are assassinated, killed by Hutu extremists in Rwanda, occasions a large refugee flow from Rwanda into eastern Congo, where there is also a Tutsi population of Congolese origin. The presence of those refugees, and then subsequently the genocide in Rwanda is ended by the victory of a Tutsi-led militia, led by Paul Kagame, who's now the president of Rwanda. So you now have a Tutsi government in Rwanda, post the genocide. The Hutu militias, those that committed the genocide, many of whom have also fled into eastern Congo, are now being harbored in eastern Congo with the support of Mobutu Sese Seko. Rwanda is not pleased with that, and Laurent Kabila, a Congolese living in exile in Tanzania, comes to the head of a small Congolese force, but backed by a powerful Rwandan army, which then relatively quickly dispatches Mobutu from power. And so Laurent Kabila comes to power in 97. The Rwandans are very present in Kinshasa, not wanting to leave the new President Kabila to support these Hutu militias, which Kabila has disagreements with the Rwandans, eventually begins to support the Hutu militias as a tool, leverage against the Rwandans. The Rwandans aren't pleased with that either. Kabila is assassinated by one of his own bodyguards under suspicious circumstances. His son takes power, Joseph Kabila. But before that happens, the Rwandans decide to start a second rebellion against Laurent Kabila. And there's a rebel group formed from the east, the Congolese Rally for Democracy, that begins sweeping from the east of Congo to the west toward Kinshasa. The Ugandans, who've also been present and playing in Congo for various ways, also jump in with a rebel-backed group. And then before they can take Kinshasa, the capital, three armies, Angola, Namibia, Zimbabwe, come to the aid of the Kinshasan army and are really the only thing that keep the RCD, Rwandan-backed rebels and the Ugandan-backed rebels from taking control of the country. So now you have a second war and a series of peace agreements that eventually end that conflict, negotiated between 1999 and 2003. That then paves the way for Joseph Kabila to become an elected leader after a transitional government of Congo. He comes in 2006 and 2005, 2006. And then, so supposedly, this war has ended. So both the first two wars in Congo really started by the treatment of Hutu militias and Rwandan Tutsi and Congolese Tutsi in the east of Congo is the seed of two wars in Congo. And now it has become the seed of a third war in Congo. So not long after Kabila comes to power as the elected president, there is a renegade general, formerly of the RCD, the Rwandan-backed rebels, launches a rebellion against the Kabila government, also based in the east, also purportedly to protect Congolese Tutsi.
So, clearly the role of Rwanda has loomed large, and I think we've got a map. Could you talk a little bit about just the relative sizes and populations of these two countries?
So Rwanda, if you look on the map, Congo is a vast country. It's basically the size of the U.S. east of the Mississippi. Huge area. Rwanda is a relatively small area. It's not even big enough to spell the name Rwanda in it, so you see it as RW on the map, kind of tucked in the sort of middle of the eastern border of Congo. Rwanda is Africa's most populous nation, where the land pressure is very high. Land is intensively used, primarily for agriculture and for herding. So there's been conspiracy theories surrounding Rwanda and its designs on Congo, where there is a ethnically similar population, but a tremendous amount of more land, fertile land, resource-rich land, agriculturally rich, timber-rich land. And so there's always been a bit of a background conspiracy theory saying Rwanda basically is using this cover of going after Hutu militias and protecting Tutsi populations as a smokescreen to really cover its grand designs on big chunks of eastern Congo.
And what about the Kinshasan government? I mean, when was the last time that they really had functional control of the whole of Congo?
Well, it would really be under earlier years of the Mobutu era. Mobutu presided over the gradual erosion of all the institutions of Congo, including the state structures. He inspired the term kleptocracy because he stole so much from his own country and preyed on his own country. And so in that time, state controls in the east began to wither as well. So even before Mobutu left power, things began to get out of control and unmanaged in the east as well. And then with the Rwandan genocide, it just rapidly accelerated that process now. So you had Rwanda there, you had some Burundian troops there and some Ugandan troops there. So in that period, late 90s into the early 2000s, there really has been no effective state control of the eastern part and the northeastern part of Congo.
And what is there about the East? Is it a function of geography or ethnicity? And why is the East typically sort of...
I think it's more around ethnicity. Well, it's geography, not in the sense of difficult, impassable terrain or anything like that. Geography in the sense of natural wealth. I mean, it's the richest part from a resource perspective. It's the richest part of the Congo by far. You have both the river system, the Congo River, and its tributaries, which is an amazing resource there. But more relevantly, you have diamond deposits, uranium deposits, copper deposits. Coltan, Colombian tantalite, which is used in cell phones. Most of the world's coltan comes from Congo, from the eastern part of Congo. Timber resources. So that's a very attractive resource that lots of people want to control. But on the ethnic side, you do have the history of the Tutsi population in that region, not just in Congo or in Rwanda. There has been tension and conflict over the years. The colonial era exploited those ethnic differences and heightened tension between the groups. So I've had a prominent Tutsi describe Tutsis to me as, he said, we are the Jews of Africa, and that basically they are the the target of many, many different kinds of conspiracy theories. So if X, insert your problem, is wrong with your country, well, it's probably the fault of the Tutsi. So that, from the Tutsi perspective, their ethnicity has been targeted for many, many years.
And just so we're clear on their sort of ethnic geography, they're distributed over what kinds of territories?
So it's really, they're known as Neolithic people, so people of the Nile Valley. So they come from similar ethnically to all the way up to Ethiopia, Eritrea, down through the Nile Valley is sort of the path of the migration of Tutsi ethnicity into Central Africa from sort of East Africa. So they but they've for many, many years, mixed with local populations, and it really was not a flashpoint of conflict as it is now. And I think you asked about what about the East, and I think it's those two things. It's the fact that you have lots of people who want to control that mineral wealth. You have a conflict fault line between Tutsis and non-Tutsis, which can be exploited to be the cover you could use to get at that resource. So either you're trying to defend against Rwandans, creating a greater Rwanda, a Tutsi-controlled greater Rwanda, or you're trying to defend Tutsis living in Congo from non-Tutsi who are trying to exterminate them. So the truth about why are people there and what motivates them is some mixture of all those things. The pure intention of actually wanting to protect an ethnic group and the not so pure intentions of wanting to control the diamond trade or the uranium trade.
Well, and one of the epithets that's always leveled against anyone operating against the central government, it seems, in the East is, well, they're not really Congolese, they're really Rwandans.
Right.
What's your sense of Rwandan Tutsi identity and sense of being Congolese rather than Rwandan?
So there is very much, if you take a Banyamulenge, a Congolese Tutsi, they are not Rwandan and are insulted by any insinuation that they may be Rwandan. And even among those that were prominent in the RCD, the Tutsi-associated rebel group in Congo, they would say, we are Congolese. We want to be accepted in our own country, but we are Congolese. And there's really no desire to reunify. There's not a movement to sort of reunify with Rwanda. That's not a part of this, as you would see in other conflicts in different parts of the world where an ethnic group outside of a national border wants to unify with the ethnic group inside another national border. So it's not that at all. And they see themselves very much as Congolese. I've had non-Tutsi Congolese say, there's no Congolese Tutsi. They're all Rwandans, by definition, if you're a Tutsi or a Rwandan. And so there is that basic ethnic tension.
Well, when we come back, I'd like to get into this notion of why the current fighting broke out and also how much sort of the larger international context plays into that. So our viewers will be right back with more International Focus.
The Institute of World Affairs presents our community with a range of public programs relating to global issues, U.S. foreign policy, and the world economy. For more information about the Institute of World Affairs, call 414-229-3220 or visit our website at www.iwa.uwm.edu.
Welcome back to International Focus. We're talking with Rob Ricigliano about fighting in Congo. Well, we've covered a little bit of the historical context. Now, can you talk a little bit about why the current round of fighting erupted?
So in the peace deal that ended or was supposed to end the Second Congolese War, there was to be a national army and there was to be development and reconciliation and so on, and rebel leaders and rebel armies were to be either incorporated into a national army or a national government or demobilized. It sounds like a nefarious sort of word, but basically it means getting people who used to be fighters to put down their guns and become farmers or engineers or whatever productive industry they could find. So that process was very, very slow. and also the process of local elections was very, very slow. But the basic issues that really led to the first and second Congolese wars really never got resolved. So this is not to excuse the current fighting, but General Laurent Nkunda, who is a former general in the RCD army, breaks away, starts his own counterinsurgency or insurgency against the Kinshasa government. And his complaints or his demands are basically three. One is the return of Congolese Tutsi refugees from Rwanda. Now, this goes back to your question about are they Rwandan and are they Tutsi? So there is resistance by certain elements in the Kinshasa government, especially people around Kabila, to let more ethnic Tutsis come back into Congo, especially if you believe they're all Rwandans anyway.
Right, but they would say these are Congolese of Tutsi heritage that fled the fighting across the border, and now they want to come home.
And there are about 1 million displaced people, mostly Tutsi, in eastern Congo. So a lot of them did go into Rwanda and Burundi. So yeah, it's certainly. It's very hard to say that they're all Rwandan. I mean, there may be some, but certainly the vast majority are probably Congolese. And they want to return home, and so the government has really been dragging its feet on that. So that's one of Nkunda's complaints. Another one of his complaints is the Hutu militias that were complicit in the genocide in Rwanda and Burundi are still operating in eastern Congo. And during the Second War, the Kinshasa government allied itself with those Hutu militias. They armed them and funded them, and there's fairly good documentation that relationship hasn't ended, really, that there is still support going from the Kinshasan government to these rebel groups, these Hutu groups, even to the point of jointly extracting resources from Congo that they're selling on an illegal market to fund either people's personal pockets or to fund these militias. So that's the second one. And the third is that there needs to be a serious effort to incorporate the 6,000 fighters who are loyal to General Nkunda and Nkunda himself into the National Army, which they said was also not happening. So those are on the surface the demands that are being made. Of course, the Kinshasan story would be he's a war criminal, Nkunda. He's in it for resource wealth, or he's a puppet of Rwanda, and it's Rwanda's way of creating instability in Congo.
So let's talk a little bit about those resources. I mean, you would think in a chaotic situation like this, maybe it's not a good environment to do business. But is the extraction of these resources still going on?
Well, yeah. I mean, very much so, and probably more so than even during the Second War. It's a corollary, I think, of war and instability that business knows no sort of partisan grounds. Infamously, Iran and Iraq during the Iraq-Iran war still went to OPEC meetings together to sell oil because it profited both of them. So business people are allowed to operate there because that's how they get profits. So it's a complex chain. So it's on the ground. What happens is you'll have a series of middlemen who will pay local laborers to mine tantalite or copper or whatever. They then pay them pennies on the dollar for what they mine. They sell it to a second middleman who sells it to a third middleman who eventually sells it to some legitimate business interest, multinational business interest, which gets that resource, whatever it is, copper or diamonds, from Congo to an international market, and where they get a much higher price for it, obviously. So in that chain somewhere, whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 levels removed, you have international business interests or the government or private entrepreneurs profiting from the mineral trade. So it's even doing all these wars. I mean, diamonds were still getting out, copper was still getting out, tantalite was still getting out, lumber was still getting out.
So is it an example in which war is good for business for a number of these middle people?
Sure. I mean, there have been studies. The World Bank, Paul Collier did an analysis of what drives violent conflict, and is it poverty or is it ethnic grievance or whatever? And his main conclusion was that the highest factor that correlated to the presence of violent conflict was the presence of an easily appropriated natural resource that could be used to buy guns and uniforms and pay people and feed them and so on. So Congo, in that sense, has an abundance of natural resources that can be co-opted to support violence.
Well, if we look at some of the real human costs of this conflict, I mean, it's horrendous. I mean, 5 million people is a scale that's rarely seen.
It's hard to imagine what that is.
And yet, it's rarely on the front page.
Right.
So, how do you explain its sort of back burner character?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these conflicts that it amazingly flies just below the radar. I mean, even Darfur in Sudan has gotten much more attention internationally than Congo has, and not to diminish what's happening in Darfur, but it is still a greater amount of death and suffering in Congo. But I think it's a combination of, on the one hand, hopelessness. They see the genocide in Rwanda, and that was a tragedy of international non-response. And so there's still a degree of that where people are leery of getting involved in this part of the world, only to be bogged down into a conflict that cannot be managed successfully. You don't have the spectacular killing, and if I can use that sounds like an oxymoron, but in Rwanda, when 800,000 people are dying in 100 days, the international media pays attention. The scenes are dramatic, tragic, but dramatic. The killing is much, and the death is much, if you will, slower and less dramatic in Congo. So you do get some reports of mass rapes of women and young boys. You get recruitment of child soldiers sometimes getting attention. But the overall, it doesn't really pierce, it doesn't seem, that veil. And the international community, in my time in working with various governments, the attitude has largely been, look, we want you guys to keep Congo from deteriorating into another Rwanda-like situation where we have to get involved. So as long as you can kind of keep a lid on it manageably, and as long as we can say, hey, there's a new president, give him time, then we're happy. They'll tolerate the death. I mean, unfortunately, that's the reality in Congo. The current fighting, though, has raised fears that this will descend back into another African World War. They called the Second Congo War Africa's First World War, because so many countries were involved in it. And there is some concern that is in fact going to happen again. So it may be that Congo pierces that level of attention for some period of time. On the other hand, European governments and others have said, well, we want to get out of Afghanistan, and we don't want to get into another conflict that we're not sure how we're going to get out of.
So, we'll have a new administration here soon. If you were advising President Obama on, given the constraints that his administration will likely have, what sort of practical steps could the U.S. take?
I think one step, and it may not seem like it's a lot, but I think they do need to change the rhetoric and the visibility of Congo on the agenda. So things like appointing a special ambassador from the Secretary of State on Congo, or special ambassador to the Great Lakes region. We've had a special ambassador to the Great Lakes region for a while. I think we need to bump that profile up and actually focus it more on Congo and its regional implications. But I think that has to be an early and prominent pick. If you put someone like Colin Powell in that role, right, it would send a different message than if you took someone who was otherwise very competent but not known. I think you have to do that to basically say it's on the radar screen, it is important. If for no other reason than to convince other countries that you need to work with, that in fact you are in this in some significant way. So you're not trying to pawn it off on others, but that you're making a commitment to this. I think the solutions need to be regional. I think they need to be fairly drastic. I think, if we've taken countries that have completely fallen apart into basically receivership. They've been run by the UN or others. Eastern Congo, I think, fits that bill. Until you can get the security situation under control, which means also getting the economic situation under control, which means getting control of those resources that are being used to fund all kinds of violent activity. And then you also are dealing with neighbors like Uganda and Rwanda. You have to take a major sort of holistic approach to this. They shouldn't expect that it's going to be done overnight. that we're going to solve Congo in 100 days. No, I think you need to put it on a different tact, though. And I think part of that has to be a relatively significant international presence, not just on the peacekeeping level. It already has more peacekeeping troops in Congo than anywhere else, and the UN peacekeeping troops more than anywhere else in the world. It's not just going to be, adding a few thousand more troops. It's going to be taking a different political and economic as well as military approach.
Well, I think we're going to have to leave it at that, and we'll see if this conflict actually can make its way to the front page. Certainly the human toll would suggest that it should. To our viewers, we'll see you next time on International Focus.
For information about the Institute of World Affairs and its many programs, or to become a member of the Institute, call 414-229-3220, or visit us at our website.